All right, so in this video, I want to introduce you to Visual Studio Code, and maybe we can go ahead and use a bit of Azure SDK in order to programmatically set up a resource. So this is very similar to how we use the Bash CLI or PowerShell CLI, but we're going to use a programming language to do it. And again, I really believe that you should learn this as soon as possible because very quickly you end up having to touch code or scripting or something. So get comfortable with it right away here. So what you're going to need to do is install in Visual Studio Code. I'm not going to show you how to install that. It's not that hard to learn, but you're going to go look for Visual Studio Code and you're going to install it. This is a free and open source coder or code editor. And once it's installed, we can go ahead and start utilizing it. So you go ahead and install it. I already got it installed. In fact, I got a project open here, not the project we're going to use, but this is actually how I stitch the big video when I send it over to Free Code Camp. So I have a bunch of scripts here. But what I want to do is once you have it installed, we're going to go ahead and create a new folder. So on my desktop, I'm going to go do that. So let me just make some room on my desktop here, okay? All right, so I got some nice room on my desktop. I'm going to make a new folder here, and I'm just going to call it Azure, because we keep doing things with the storage bucket. So we'll just say Azure SDK example. You can name it title case, lowercase, however you want to name it, but just make sure there's no spaces in it. I know that's a bit hard to read on my background here, but we now have a folder, and that's just going to give us a place to start working with. So I'm going to go ahead and say File, Open Folder, and this is pointing to my sites directory. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to say Desktop. I think we have a desktop there, right? And I'm going to say Show Local, so it'll just open it up here, make our lives a little bit easier. I'll click on Desktop here. I'm going to choose Azure SDK example, select that folder. And so it's going to open that folder up. And it's opening up my whole desktop, which is really not what I wanted to do. That is totally wrong. So give me 2 seconds, okay? All right, so what I'm thinking is what we'll have to do is try this again. So let's say Open Folder. And we'll go to Desktop. And we'll double click into that folder. Make sure we're double clicked into it and say Select Folder. There we go. So we're in that folder. Looks like we're not in there, but it's here in the top. And, again, I'm not going to go super heavy into this because this is a completely separate discipline, but do your best to follow along. So we want to create a new file. You can do that by going to File, New Text File up here. You can also click this little icon here to do that. So we'll go ahead and say New Text File. And the question is what are we going to write our code in? Because we're going to need to write this in some kind of language. And so I'm just trying to decide what we can use here. So that is another question as well. So just give me a second to think about it, okay? Instead of thinking about it, what I want to do is I'm just going to go ask, go ahead and take a look quickly. So we'll say, it's probably in the slides, but I can't remember all these things off the top of my head. Azure SDK languages. And so we'll go here and we'll take a look. And we have Android, C#, Go, C, C++, iOS, Java, JavaScript, Python. No Ruby, which, I think there's Ruby somewhere, but they haven't been maintaining it very well. So we do have a few options here. The question is, which one do we want to use? I don't really like any of these languages, but we're going to have to make a choice. And so I guess we could use C#. So maybe what we'll do is go ahead and use C#. I almost feel like I'm going to regret using that. So, all right. So anyway, what I want to show you here is, yeah, we'll write some C# code. And actually, we're going to cheat. We're going to go use ChatGPT because I really don't want to spend forever figuring out how to do it. So we'll say using the Azure SDK for C#, let's deploy a new resource group or a new storage account in a new resource group for blob storage. Okay, so we'll go ahead and hit enter and we'll see what it produces. Deploy a new Azure storage account for blob storage in a new resource group using Azure SDK. You're going to need the following. So it's going to say install the Azure SDK. Okay, and so we'll just give it a moment to spit out some stuff. All right, so it's produced some code here. And so just taking a look here, we have our code example. And it's explaining everything here, but I don't need that. And so the idea here is that we first are doing our imports. Most programming languages are going to have you require import resources. So obviously resource manager for creating the resource. And then we need storage for storage accounts, identity for probably connecting to Azure. That's most likely what it is. System is for system stuff. So maybe for doing outputs and things like that. And right away, we can see that we need to create our credentials. And then from there, it's saying initialize the ARM client. So ARM stands for Azure Resource Manager. So I imagine that has something to do with maybe resource groups. We'll see here in a moment. So we create the Azure Resource Manager client. And from there, we can get our default subscription. That makes sense. And from the subscription, we'll get our resource groups and we'll create or update a new one here. And so here it looks like it's going to create our resource group. Then next we have our storage management client. So it looks like that's how we create our storage account, or at least it's the manager for it anyway. And then we're creating our storage account. Okay, that makes sense. If this looks very verbose and tricky, it is. It's just the nature of C#. C# is a great language, but I'm just going to say that the way they choose to name things here, I even find a bit confusing, and I work with every single programming language. But we do have some code here, and so the idea is that we can go ahead and copy this code, and I'm going to go ahead and paste this into Visual Studio Code. Now, I do want to point out that in order to run this program, we actually have to have C# installed. And I'm not even sure if I actually have that installed on this computer. So we're going to have to see what we can do there. So I'm going to go ahead and just save this file. And I'm just going to name it, we'll just say storage, new storage account .cs, because that is the extension for C#. And so it says, do you want to install the recommended C# extension for the language? We'll say install. So the thing is that Visual Studio Code on the left-hand side, they have extensions. And they have extensions for everything. And I just want to point out that Azure, because Microsoft created this project and Microsoft owns GitHub and all this stuff, is Visual Studio Code has tons of synergies with Azure. And in fact, you can create resources and other things via Visual Studio Code directly. So here it says the .NET Core SDK could not be located. And so we can go here and say get the SDK. It says, do you want to code to open the external website? Yes. And it's complaining because it's saying, hey, you don't have this installed, it's not going to work. And so we could go ahead and install it here. That is one way to do it. But the thing is, it really depends on what kind of machine you're on. If you're on Windows or Linux or Mac OS, it's going to be a different installation process. So we can do it this way, but there's another option. And the other option that I'm going to recommend is to not do it locally, but do it in a cloud developer environment. Now, most cloud service providers have a cloud developer environment. AWS has Cloud9, GCP has, I forget what it's called, Project IDX, and they even have one built into their platform. But for whatever reason, all we get is Cloud Shell in Azure. So I like to think of GitHub's code spaces as Azure's cloud developer environment. Why it's not directly integrated with Azure, I have no idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to GitHub. And you are going to have to create a GitHub account, and they're free, and you should absolutely have one because every person that's working in tech should have a GitHub account. But I'm going to go ahead and log into mine. I'll be back here in just a moment. And if you don't have one, go ahead and create yourself a GitHub account. All right, so I'm in my GitHub account, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create myself a new repository. And again, don't worry if you don't know all of this. Just do your best to follow along because there is a lot to learn here, and I'm not trying to overwhelm you. But let's go ahead. I'm going to choose the owner as myself. So you would have chosen a username when you signed up. Mine is Omen King. I also have like another account called exampro.co. I probably should use that one. And we're going to just say Azure SDK C# example. So you can name it exactly the same. These are you can have the same name for a repo that someone else has because it's going to be based on the scope of your name here. We can make it private or public. I'm going to make it public. That way everyone's going to see it. I'm going to add a README here as well. And we're going to go ahead and create this repository. So we'll go ahead and create that. And we'll just give it a moment. And so now that that's been created, you're not going to have this Git pod button here, but what I'm going to do is drop this down. and it's, sorry, code. I want the code button here. And we have this option called code spaces. And so here, code spaces does have a free tier, or they should have a free tier anyway. Yeah, up here. And the free tier is going to let us run for a short period of time. I'm not going to get fully into that because we're not going to be doing enough coding to even worry about that. But we're going to go ahead and create ourselves a code space on main. And honestly, I actually prefer Gitpod for cloud developer environments. The reason I'm using code spaces is because Visual Studio Code has a marketplace. So if we go ahead and type in Visual Studio Code Marketplace, and these are extensions for Visual Studio Code. It's when we're over here on the left-hand side and we're installing fun plugins or extensions, they're coming from this marketplace. And even though I prefer Gitpod, this portal, this marketplace is provided by Microsoft, and it's a proprietary marketplace. So all of the official Microsoft integrations are here. And if you use a Gitpod, you're not going to be able to access the full suite of these. You could technically use them if you opened Gitpod within local Visual Studio Code. I'm not going to do that here today. We're going to just go ahead and use code spaces. And I don't use code spaces that often, but we're going to use it here. The first thing I want to do is change the theme because I do not want to look at white. So I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom to this cog here. And I'm going to go to settings or themes. Here we go. And we'll choose color theme. And I'm just going to go and say dark Visual Studio Code. And now my eyes are thanking me for putting that effort in. And so what I want to do is create a new file. So we can upload new files here by dragging them. So on our desktop here, we have this folder and this file. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag this file on over. Okay. And the thing about code spaces and Gitpod is that they should have a lot of these things pre-installed. So down below here it says, do you want to install the recommended C# dev kit? Yes, please. I would love to have the dev kit. So the dev kit helps you manage your code with a Solutions Explorer and test your code. Sounds great to me. And we're going to go ahead and let that install. Now, I want to point out that the way these cloud developer environments work is as long as you are running them, they are consuming spend. So if you are trying to walk away and go get coffee or food, please, please, please make sure you close the tab so that it's not just running and you're utilizing credits or usage. Again, you're on a free tier, but let's make sure we don't use up all that free tier. So I think that extension is now installed. And so we should start to be able to use C#. So what we'll do is go back over here, and we have our new file, and it's right here. And so we have our program. And so we should be able to run it. So there's a few values we need. We need our subscription ID, our resource group name, our storage account, and our location. Okay, so these are the few things we're going to want to fill out. So I'm going to go here and, yeah, I'll take West US. I don't care. It doesn't matter. We'll say West US. Then we have our storage account name. Remember, that has to be very unique. So I'm just going to say, hello, world. And I'm going to put a bunch of numbers here. And I'm going to say AB. Remember to keep it lowercase and not any trouble here. And here for the resource group, we're going to say my SDK. Did we already create one? No, we didn't. So we'll say my SDK RG. And then we need our subscription ID. So we'll go over here. Subscription ID is going to be, if we click into our subscriptions, it's right here. So we'll go ahead and copy that in. Okay. And we'll make our way back over to here. I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. We'll say allow. Good. We'll click, oops. Try not to add any additional characters by accident. Be very careful. But yeah, that looks fine to me. And so I filled in all the things that it's saying that I need. I also want to point out that, ChatGPT generated the code, but it doesn't always give you good code. So just understand that we could run this and it could possibly not work. And it might even give us things that we don't want. So always make sure you can understand what you're reading. So here it's saying it's using the standard LRS, which is good. It's using storage version 2. So everything that we've been doing up to this point. And so now I want to run this code. Again, I don't run C# code a lot, but sometimes it uses Mono. Sometimes it uses different engines for running. But let's go take a look at our extensions. And we'll click into this one and see if there's any options to start running it. So it does say there's like build and run options here. So it says Command Shift net build. So it's possible we can build it that way, and that's probably the way I'd like to build it. So we'll go back over here. And the thing is that we haven't logged into anything, so it's my assumption that this isn't going to work. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to open up the command palette. So I believe we go down here to the bottom left corner, click the cog. If we type in Control Shift P or click this button, it'll open the command palette. And what we're looking for is that .NET build. So I'm going to go ahead and do .NET build and see if that works. I did click it. We'll try this again. Command palette. Says we used it. .NET build. And I'm not seeing anything happening. So did it build? I'm not sure. So give me just a moment. All right, so I went over and I asked ChatGPT, how can I just run it? And it was not helpful whatsoever. It did tell us that we should probably have the Azure CLI installed, which I absolutely agree. So this is a great opportunity for us to do that here. In fact, it might already be pre-installed. So if we just type in AZ, is it here? No, it is not. So maybe that's something we can go do. So I'm going to go type in AZ CLI install, and we'll go get the instructions for that. And so I want to install this for Linux. We're probably on Ubuntu or Debian, so I'm going to go ahead and click that. I'm going to go to install Azure CLI. And so we want this one-line command. I've done this a lot of times, so I know it's this one-line command. So we'll go ahead and copy that. And we'll go back over to GitHub Codespaces, and we'll go and paste that in there. Now I realize this font might be a little bit small, so while that is installing, I'm going to go ahead and increase our font. So I'll go ahead and increase our font size. I'm going to type in here terminal. And if you're finding that I'm going really fast, the great thing is you can always go back and watch the video. I really do encourage you to try to work through the steps and try to figure out what it is that I'm doing. Of course, I could go a little bit slower, but the best learning is the part where you're going to go out and try to really figure out what it is that I'm doing here. So that's why I'm not being super detailed and slow with these steps. But just be aware of that. So I'm just typing terminal font in here because I want to increase that font. There it is. And so we'll just say 24. There we go. That might be a little bit too big. We'll go down to 20. Okay. And so the CLI is now installed. So if we type in AZ, it will now should prompt us. And so now the next thing we want to do is log in. So I can type in AZ login. And so what it did is as soon as we typed in AZ login, it popped up a new browser window, and it's allowing us to connect to Microsoft Azure. So I click this, and even though it's not going anywhere, that's totally okay. We'll go back over here. And it didn't work because we are not doing this on our local machine. We're doing this within a browser. So it says if no web browser is available, or if the web browser fails to open, use the device code below. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to actually do that instead. So I'm going to type in AZ login -- user device code and hit enter. Okay, and we're going to give it a moment here. Oh, and then it says copy this link. So we're going to go to this link here and hit enter. And it's going to say enter this code in. And so we'll go ahead and enter in this code that it wants. Okay, and we'll hit next. And then we'll pick our account. Are you trying to log in with the Azure CLI? We absolutely are. We'll go back over to here. And it now gives us output. So we are now logged into Azure CLI. So now that the CLI is installed, we are in better shape. The thing is, when you log into the Azure CLI, I don't know where it is, but it's probably dumping some kind of file locally onto this computer, onto this workspace. If I type in ls, so somewhere in here, I'm not sure where, but somewhere on the storage of this workspace in the cloud, it's storing the credentials to log us in. So we don't have to pass in, or we shouldn't have to pass in credentials here. And when we run the script, it's going to rely on that local file. And it should pull it from these default credentials. So the next thing I want to do is run this program. And it really did not tell us how to do that. So I should know how, because I do have my own unpublished thing. So I'm going to go take a look and find those instructions. All right, so I just want to point out that you will not have access to this. This is totally private, but I'm just trying to find notes from it. And I also wanted to prove that I actually do know all the programming languages for cloud, but knowing them, when I say I know them, I mean like I've used them all and I've made really good notes. And so when I need to go back to them, I can always look it up. And so somewhere here, we should have some notes for C#, and because there's a few different ways we can run it. There's a program called CSC, which is the turbo compiler. So it depends on what we want to utilize. And we could use NuGet. We could have also created a .NET project. That's probably what we should have done. So that's probably what we should have done, is we probably should have created ourselves a .NET project, because now that I'm remembering, that's pretty much the way that we do it. Okay, and that's going to make our life a lot easier for utilizing. So what I'm going to do is just take a look here, and let's go back to ChatGPT and say, okay, how do we use the Azure SDK C# and we create a new .NET project? Okay, and so this should be more in line in terms of what we want. So ChatGPT is only good if you know what to ask it. And it's talking about NuGet packages, and that definitely is what it looks like I was doing there before. So we'll give it a moment here to help us see what's going on. I just want those commands. And it's asking us to do this through, it's like telling us to click through. It's saying like, go up here and click, 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 like create a new project in there. But that's not how I want to do it. I want to do it via the CLI. And all I wanted to know was, whoops, I just closed that tab. We actually needed that tab. But what I wanted to know was, what framework version does it want us to use? Because that could matter, right? And that's what we're not getting an answer for. So that's kind of important. So we'll go back over to here, and it's really, really, really not helping us. This is not helpful whatsoever. So I'm just going to tell it to stop talking because I know it's not helping us. And I'm just going to pull up that example again. Just give me a moment. All right, so I have this pulled up again. I'm going to go back to my hello world. Again, you're not going to have this. You don't need to have direct access to this. It's fine. And then down below, there is the thing here. So we need to create ourselves a new project. We're going to say .new console, because it's a console project, and we're going to want to have that package. So I'm just going to drag this off screen so I can see it and type it. And then you'll just have to follow along here with me. Okay, just give me just 2 seconds to be able to see this here. And okay, so what we're going to do is go back over to here, to our project, and I'm going to try this. I'm going to type in .new console -n, and we're going to say package.net, and we're going to try framework net 6.0. Even if there was a newer version of the framework we could use for C# or for .net, sometimes it doesn't like the latest version. So even over here, like I made a note, I said, even though .NET is the latest, neither fake nor bogus works with .NET 7.0. So, you know what, I'm going to try to use 7, and hopefully we're not going to run into issues here. And so it did a bunch of stuff, and it created this package over here. So it actually created a folder called package.net. And if we open it up, we have a program. And so that's where our code has to go. So I'm going to go ahead, and I know this is a bit of a mess, but I'm going to go ahead and copy this over here. And I'm going to take all of this, and we're going to cut this. We're going to go over this program, and we're going to paste it into here. Okay? And I'll delete the old file here. So now we have our package, and we're in better shape. So now we can probably use those .NET commands to build the package. That's probably what we can do here. So that's what I would like to do next. So I have to find that command. I believe it's just .NET run. So if we type in .NET run, that should probably do it. Couldn't find a project. So we probably have to cd into that folder. So we'll type in cd package -.net /enter. I'm going to type in ls to see what's in there. I'm going to type in clear, clear to clear the screen. I'm going to go ahead and type in .net run. Okay, and hopefully it's just going to run it. Now, we didn't install any packages for it, so I don't know how we would know how to run these. And it looks like it's actually complaining. It's saying the type or namespace name Azure could not be found. It's talking about this up here. So normally, you like in programming languages, you have to install packages or libraries. And every single programming language usually has its own package manager. And I believe the one for .NET, or the one for that one, is called NuGet, N-U-G-E-T. So there's probably a way to add it, and it's actually probably part of, because I'm looking at my commands here, it's probably part of, NuGet's probably part of .NET. So I'm going to type in .NET, add package, and we need to figure out what the package name is. So I'm going to just type in Azure, because it's probably what it is. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and we have to actually spell .NET correctly for that to work. Again, this is just me totally guessing, but I believe that's what's going to work. And so I go up here, and it looks like it's trying to install something. It's talking about this falling back here. And then it says error. There is no version available for the package Azure. So clearly there is something more to this here. So Azure NuGet package and version. So that's what I'm looking for here. Okay. And I'm just trying to find what it is. So I don't want to search the internet for that. So I want to install the Azure SDK via .NET add package. What is the command? Okay. Once you know programming, ChatGPT is great because you can narrow it down and help you, save you some time, but it's not always easy. And sometimes it just doesn't tell you what you want to hear right away. So here's saying Azure Identity. So it looks like we might have to do them individually. Okay, so let's go give that a try. So I'm going to go back over to GitHub in our code spaces. And let's try each of these individually. So I'm hitting up. I'm going to try Identity. Let's see what happens. It looks like it's installing. That looks great. Okay, great. So we're on to something here. Excellent. So we have that one. The next one is Resource Manager. So I'll paste that in there. Enter. Just going to bring this over here. I don't know if we need to specify these individually underneath. So I'm just going to copy them anyway and just try them. Again, I don't know if we have to do that. Often when you have the top level one, you get them all. But since doing the top level Azure didn't work, I don't trust it. And it did install something, so that looked like that worked. We'll do storage next. And these two we're not going to do because these are built-in packages. We don't have to go ahead and install them. Very common for most languages. So I'm going to type in clear here to clear out our screen. I'm going to hit up, up, up till we get back to that run command. And we're going to try that. It says there is no given argument that corresponds to the required parameter data here. And it's saying on line 2490. So we're going to go down below and look at line 24. And it's complaining about this. Saying something about data. So there's no argument given that corresponds to the required parameter data. And so probably what might be happening here is either, well, ChatGPT gave us bad code, or it's looking at old documentation. So it's not that it purposely gave us bad code, it just doesn't know what's the latest. There's a few other errors here, like the name SKU name does not exist in the current context. The kind does not exist in the current context. And it's talking about this here. So it really looks like ChatGPT lied to us. Okay. So what we can do is we can just go ahead and paste this into ChatGPT and see if it can try to solve it for us. If not, we can go look it up ourselves. We get the following errors from the code provided earlier in this chat. Okay, so for me, I would just go out to the documentation, go fix it. I'm trying to show you how you would do this if you don't have the same kind of programming skills. So here it's saying the errors you encountered, project suggests some issues. Great, so it's just gonna tell us what problems it had, and then we're gonna wait just a moment and find out what it is. Make sure you have the latest packages. Well, we just installed them, so it should be correct. Okay. Well, the other thing is that we don't know what versions Azure was using, right? So that might be the issue. Check the latest SDK documentation. Of course. Yeah, so it's, okay, suggest code changes. Like, come on. You're not really helping me today, ChatGPT. All right, and we'll take a look here at what it's saying. So looking at this very carefully, here it says new resource group data. And then this one here is saying create or async. So it looks slightly different. The method seems to require additional parameter. Okay, it's guessing. It doesn't know what it's doing. So I really don't trust it anymore. And so what we'll do is we'll go back here and take a look at our code. So the first one it failed on was line 24. All right, and so that's on here. So we need to go figure this out. I'm going to close some of these tabs because we're kind of getting overwhelmed with tabs here. And I'm going to go type in Azure SDK C#. And we'll go over here. We'll say storage accounts. And we're going to try to figure out if we can find some official docs. Okay, AZ login, we've already done this. Here they're using Visual Studio. We're not using, well, this is how it did it over here, which is fine. But we just want to see the reference docs. So yeah, it's talking about blob storage, which is great. Let's go to reference. Azure, it might be, whoops, might be over here. Azure SDK C# reference documentation. We'll go over here and we're looking for these commands. So the first one it mucked up on was line 24. So I believe this one's okay. This is for creating a resource group. So we'll go here and I'm going to search resource group. It's probably under resource manager. And here's showing that we add that .NET package, so that makes sense. And so we have this line here. So if we go back to our code, do we have that line? Looks like we do, right? New ARM client. Yeah, it's down here, sorry. New ARM client, so that's right. Now we get a resource group collection. So this one's slightly different. It's trying to do it all in one go, which that's one way of coding it, but I actually kind of prefer what they're doing here in the documentation. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this so that we assign this to its own variable. Okay. In coding, you can do things multiple ways. So, you know, one code can do the exact same thing as something else and be written differently. That can make it very confusing if you don't know what you're looking at. We'll go ahead and paste this one in next. So it looks like I cut off a bit of that code there. Okay. And so this is now the equivalent of this. So that gets that part. And then this is the equivalent of that. So that's that part. And so next thing we need to do is this create or async thing. So we'll go to the next step. And we already have these two things set up here as strings. This one's set as an Azure location. So we probably want to do what they're doing here too. Okay, so I'm going to go up here and paste this in like this instead. Okay. And it really depends on what the thing wants. So maybe in the older SDK, it took a string, but now it looks like it takes a variable data type of Azure location. That's why I'm doing it this way. Okay. So that looks fine there. The next part is resource group data. So that looks very similar to our code here. Notice it's not doing a create or async update. I mean, that's probably one way of doing it and probably a good way of doing it. Make sure you put these semicolons on the end here. C# really likes these. Some languages don't care, but this one does. And then it does it on the next step here. So it does it here. Okay, so it's still doing that operation. So we'll paste that in. And I don't know where it went. It didn't really go where I want it to go. We'll go ahead and paste that in again here. And we'll hit enter. So we have ARM operation. I don't feel like explaining this part, but that's a feature of C# coding. That's like an interface, I believe. I think that's what they call it. So we have to create or update or async. So wait until it's done. Pass in the resource group name, which is that up here. And then pass in the resource group data, which is that here. And so that takes care of this part. Okay, so we've now replaced that part of the code. So that is fine. That will create our resource group. And the next thing we need to do is create our storage account. So to be honest, because this code is so hard to do, I'm going to make it a lot easier for us. I'm just going to wipe this part out, because if we can just make a resource group, we've kind of done enough coding here. But the whole process we went through in terms of, think like starting with a single file and then having to work with it, and then we moved over to the GitHub Codespaces, which is a cloud developer environment, and we had to do some research. This is totally normal. This is what happens every single day. So I'm really happy that we're able to show that, even if it is a bit of a mess. But let's go ahead and see if this works. The only thing I'm wondering is about this Azure location. How does it know about it? Because we didn't have any requirement up here. But we'll go ahead and we'll try to do a .NET run. And it might complain about that. So it says the variable subscription ID is assigned, but the value is never used. And that's true. We don't actually ever use it anywhere here. The variable storage name account is assigned, but the value is never used. And that's because we don't ever use these. So these are warnings. They're not errors. But I'm going to go ahead and delete this one out because we're actually not using a storage account name. Whoops, that's a bit too much. And we should probably be using a subscription ID, but for the time being, I'm going to comment that out. I'm going to assume that it can infer the subscription ID based on when we did the AZ login. So we're going to go up here a bit. It says the type or namespace Azure location could not be found. That's what I thought was going to happen. So how would we include that in here? We already have Resource Manager in here, right? We do, and we're not really using these other ones anymore. So this one I'm not 100% sure. So let's say Azure location. And we'll go back over to here, because this is the thing with tutorials. They don't always tell you all of the code. They're sometimes missing something. So we need to go figure that out. And I'm going to go back over here. Okay. So it cannot be found. And we'll use yield Google for this, because it should be smart enough to do this. It's not telling us here. So we'll go and try ChatGPT. Azure location is not found in my C# script. What package do I need to install? You'd think it'd be the Resource Manager one. Okay, just tell me what I want to install. It does say Azure Resource Manager. So coming back over to here in our code, we have it right here. And we have those two there, yep. I mean, I'm pretty sure we installed that. We probably still need the resources one in, so I'm going to bring that back. Whoops. And we'll go ahead and paste that in. We'll save that. Yeah, this one's quite the pickle. So the Azure location does not exist in the current context. All right, let me go figure it out, okay? All right, so I'm not getting much luck here, but I imagine that this might be actually resolving as a string anyway. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm going to try to cheat. And I'm going to try to make this a string and see what happens. And it might work, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm going to go ahead and just say West US here. I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. And fingers crossed that it's going to let us do this. Programming is not always easy. It's sometimes like this. It says the client does not exist in the current context. The name wait until does not exist in the current context. Wow, it's really making our lives super, super, super difficult here. It's talking about these. And it's frustrating because it's not showing us in this code example all the stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this code example, go back to ChatGPT. Can you show me what using statements are missing and should be added to get this code to work? Very, very often, programs do not show you all those things, and it drives me crazy. Okay, and it could be because, like, if you're using Visual Studio, which is not the same thing as Visual Studio Code, it would automatically add those in there. Okay, and so here it's saying, okay, we got to use models for Azure location. Okay, but what about some of these other ones, like, well, anyway, we're going to go ahead and copy them in, and we're going to give it a go. We didn't have this Azure core here before. That probably is very important. So we'll go ahead and paste that in. And I'm going to go ahead and do .NET package. Was it new or install? Or it's add. Azure core, we'll do that. You know what, if we did Python or JavaScript, we would have done this a long time ago, but you know, I would say that getting exposure to .NET is probably the best one for working with Azure here. So I don't know if it installed all of these. We'll try resources. We probably don't need the model part. Oh, sorry, this is resource manager resources. And then we'll go here and we'll say resources models. Again, I don't know if we really need all the end ones like that. I don't think so. Yeah, there's no versions of it. So probably the upper ones is the one that works. We'll go ahead and try this again. Please, please, please work, or give me something different. The name client does not exist in the current context. It is killing me, this program. Client, where is that here? Let's search for that. Let's look for that. Client. Right here, client. Well, maybe it's because this one's named a bit differently. So we're coming back to our code. This one's called client right here. This one is called ARM client. So we'll just change this to client. Okay, we'll save that. We'll hit up. Please, please work. Getting closer. We have this wait until. Say, what about wait until? See if it figures that one out. And it's telling me to use Azure in the top level. That seems kind of exhaustive. For the wait until, you need to include Azure namespace. Okay, I mean, that doesn't sound right to me, but we'll go ahead and do that anyway. Unless it's saying, I mean, if it's in that namespace, couldn't we just say azure.waituntil? I'm not really sure, but we'll go ahead. People that are probably like better C# programmers than me are just cringing watching me do this. But we'll go ahead and try to see if we get that working here. So say run. Please tell me you don't need me to install Azure as well, because we have it installed like 10 different ways. Please, please, please work. It's taking time, so I mean, that's probably a good indication. Oh, it worked. Okay, so I'm gonna go back over here. I cannot believe that worked. That was so hard. And we never even created a storage count within it. So this one's called my SDK RG. So what we're gonna do, why does it say store? Oh, because the comment still says that down here below. So just say resource group here. And for all our hard work, let's save that so we never have to look for that again. It's trying to include a lot of junk in here. So I don't want all this stuff. Otherwise, that'd be too much to commit. So I'm going to go here and make a new .gitignore file, .gitignore. Okay. And I want to ignore this bin directory and this probably object directory. No, just the bin directory. Make sure we spell this right. .git ignore. And in here, I'm going to say ignore. I want to ignore package.net bin and then asterisk. So it should ignore that entire directory. If we go over here and we give this a refresh, I'm just going to make sure this is all correct here. There's a lot of stuff in here. I don't think we should be seeing that much. So I'm going to go here and do package.net/obj debug. Because I have a feeling that it's trying to include all of this stuff in here. There we go. And so this looks a lot more manageable to me. I don't know if we want to include this file. This looks like it should be in there. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and add this code. And we'll just say create an Azure resource group using the C# SDK. If you were able to get to the end here, pat yourself on the back because that was quite the challenge. If you're just able to watch the video, that's totally fine as well. Here it should commit and push. So I've pushed my code. I'm going to go back over to the repo in GitHub. So I'm going to go back over here. And I'm going to search for Azure. What do we call this? This is under Exam Pro. For you, it might be different. I called it this here, Azure SDK C#. I just want to make sure my code is here. It is. If you are trying to do this and you do not want to struggle, you can go find my code and copy it here. But again, I'm just trying to get you exposure to this stuff. I'm not trying to make you super programmers, so it's not a big deal. We're done with this code space, so I do want to shut it down. And I don't do this very often with code spaces, but let's see if there's like shut down, close, stop. Okay, here it is. Code spaces, stop current code space. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And notice that it is now stopping the workspace. That's going to stop the spend. All right, we're going to go over here. This resource group has nothing in it, but we'll go ahead and delete it. And there we go. We'll go ahead and delete that. And we're finally done. I really didn't think it would take this long, but anyway, we are done. And I'll see you in the next one, okay?